listening to Unfiltered Connections, the podcast bridging industries, crossing perspectives, and creating partnerships. I'm your host, Mario Chessa. Today, I'm joined by Bruno Goffin, a former executive at Procter & Gamble and General Electric, with over 40 years of international leadership experience across multiple industries. Bruno has built his career at the intersection of marketing, sales, and business transformation, working across sectors from consumer goods to pharma and services, and is known for his ability to transfer best practices from one industry to another. Today, he works as a consultant and leadership mentor, helping organizations and individuals navigate change, while also training leaders globally in emotional intelligence and communication. Bruno is also the author of Successful Young Leaders Are Courageous, reflecting his strong commitment to developing the next generation of leaders. Bruno, welcome to Unfiltered Connections. It's a pleasure to have you. And cheers. We're starting with a beer because that's ultimately how we met 30 years ago, right?
Exactly, I remember.
So just before we deep dive into our multiple anecdotes and stories and somehow similarities in our careers as well, I would like to go back 30 years. Is it 30 years?
Yeah, Milan,
that we met?
98, something like that.
Right. Where we met, I had just been appointed as responsible for sales and marketing for Italy at Starwood. And I think you had just changed into a new job as well.
GE and left GE, and I was just joining a company in FMCG in Milan.
Right. And like it happens many times in life, you meet somebody, it clicked, and a beautiful friendship started there. I don't know if you want to share, somehow the anecdote related to how we interacted first and what sort of resonated between us when we were talking about our move career-wise and everything. But I think it was interesting because I think already then in the back of my mind, I said, if I ever have to have a conversation and share it with somebody on professional experiences, it's definitely going to be with you, with Bruno. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, first of all, thank you to give me a chance to share that with you.
Pleasure.
And, but you just said, we met with a beer and all that. And I think one common point between us is that we enjoy life. Okay. We enjoy a good beer, a good meal. We like to have fun and all that. But to me, Mario, I think when I think back when you invited me, I thought a bit over those 30 years, what's the cement between us? And there was one word coming to my mind. I don't know if you will agree with me, but to me, it's the word esteem. Mm-hmm. Esteem, because I think I've a lot of esteem for you, and I feel that it's the same thing.
Absolutely, I confirm.
And when I try to reason why behind that, okay, why that esteem? I think what we have done, you and I, in our life, professional and private life, I think, both of us, I think we have decided to manage our own destiny, courageously. I don't know if you agree with what I'm saying, but as far as I'm concerned, for example, I decided back when I was 46 years old, okay, and I was vice president Europe at General Electric, one of the big
shot,
big job, big. And at 46 years old, I decided to pull the plug. I pulled the plug, despite the fact that I was very, very well paid, and I had a pile of stock options. Still 2 years to go to be able to collect the whole jackpot. But I decided to pull the plug because I decided to put priority on my private life, and this was courageous. Okay,
right.
But I remember you.
Well, I went through something similar when I left Starwood after having worked for many, many years at Starwood as well. It was the midst of the crisis, the famous, I call it the Lehman Brothers crisis. It was a world economic crisis where I decided it was time to change for reasons that had to do with, when you have a lot of autonomy in a job and that changes because of different variables, crisis was one of them. I decided that it was time to move on because when you wake up in the morning, you say, I'm not 100% committed to what I'm doing because I'm not happy, then you make a change. So I think in that respect, yes, There's absolutely a very similar approach as to when and why we did change. We decided to change the course of our own destiny, so to say, for sure, for sure. And that brings me actually to a subject that I would very much like to discuss with you here, which is you have gone from different industries. You've moved from different industries. And foremost, also, you moved from a corporate executive job into consultancy. So what has always intrigued me, as you know, and I've applied it, especially in marketing in my own career, but I want to hear from you in particular. When you look at, what you learned in a company like Procter & Gamble, which is a tremendous school, and not only Procter & Gamble, but the other companies that you mentioned that you worked for, how have you transferred that know-how into other industries at a later stage of your career and until today as a consultant?
But let's take the first when we met. Even before we met, I was lucky to start my career with Procter & Gamble. As you just mentioned, this is a fantastic school: sales, marketing, and management. Okay, so 18 years there, it enters your DNA. It can't, you are changed for life.
I can say the same for Star. It's yeah.
And then one day I got a phone call from a headhunter. Said, we have a great job for you, and it was GE, General Electric. And General Electric has nothing to do with FMCG. General Electric is an industrial group. It's 26 divisions at the time, and I was offered to the job of Vice President Europe Commercial Operations for GE Lighting. So it's very industrial. At that time, GE had no presence in Europe. They decided to come to Europe as a retaliation for the Philips Osram competition in the US. And so Jack Welch, the CEO, flew a full charter of top talent in lighting from the US, from logistics, manufacturing, product development, and all that. And on the commercial side, he was smart, so he said, I need a local guy because, commercial is local. And I ended up taking the job. So why did they decide to take a guy from P&G? Because they were buying what? They were buying the go-to-market and the go-to-customer strategies and the toolbox that I had learned at Procter. So it's the first great example on how you can reapply that from FMCG to industrial. Later on in consultancy, for example, I got a call from Abbott. Now it's AbbVie Pharmaceutical. It's really a pharmaceutical lab, one of the big pharmaceutical labs. And I ended up there. Why? Because they had an army of medical reps, 600 reps. Okay, and they were looking how to professionalize those guys and make them a bit more salesmen. Okay, and so
what was your finding? Sorry to interrupt you. When you started that consultancy job, what was the profile of these people that were ultimately not really salespeople, even though they were meant to be?
And they didn't want to be salespeople because, and of course, it was right because you don't go to sell a drug to a doctor; it wouldn't work. Right. But their job was to bring the information to the doctor. There is a way between bringing an information and at the end of the way, I ask them, but who is paying for your salary? And they said, it's a prescription. So minimum when you leave the doctor, make sure that the guy is convinced to prescribe. You just don't bring information. You make
right.
And so
for
this is where
the patient, obviously.
And this is where you take all the fantastic sales techniques and communication, convincing communication that I had learned at Procter & Gamble for 18 years, and I brought it in, and I ended up training those 600 guys, and the feedback was fantastic. It was so good that the CEO, the local CEO in Italy, very bright guy. He eventually is now number 2 at Abbott worldwide, so he's a bright guy. He was embarking into change management, and he told me, Bruno, I know that the marketing from Procter & Gamble has nothing to do with pharma, because when you are in pharma, okay, you sell drugs at the end of the day, so you cannot just go in with slogans and all that. It's very serious stuff.
There's restrictions.
Yeah. And so what he did, he said, I want you to bring all the P&G marketing techniques, and you are my outlaw. So I realize that what you bring is, can be very dangerous, but we are smart enough to take what we can to take out what is essential for us. So it's another example. Extreme. I'll tell you, extreme between FMCG and. But what I told him when it's interesting. I don't know if I told you the story of already the story about what when you arrive at Procter and Gamble Corporate in the U.S., Cincinnati, Ohio.
Right.
There is a sculpture in the lobby. The sculpture is a lady with a caddy, the shopping cart. And it's a sculpture there. And this lady has a name. Her name is She. Okay. And then whatever you do at Procter, you go and meet top management, middle management, whatever, with a project to say, we will launch a new product, a flanker, a new campaign or whatever. You always get the same question. What does she think?
Right. Because she's the consumer.
Exactly.
She's the one that matters.
The consumer managed the company at Procter and Gamble. And so many companies are really are looking for that.
Yeah.
Okay? But I don't know, you at Starwood, did you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say I can relate very much to what you say because I'm a great believer in cross-industry practices, whether it's from a marketing and operational point of view. But whilst you were mentioning the pharmaceutical industry, one thing that came to mind myself, I don't know if you agree, whether it's professionally or from private experiences, but every time I step into a hospital, and that includes private hospitals where, you pay, you're insured, to be taken care of, I find that there is very often a tremendous lack of soft skills.
I can't agree more.
Whether it's the doctor, the surgeon that's going to cut you open or whatever, as to the receptionist, there's clearly no attention to the fact that you are a patient client that is there on top of everything for health purposes. So it requires, in principle, a very high level of sensitivity to deal with these patients, which you most of the time don't encounter. So reason I'm bringing this up is because I think, again, piggybacking on your example, that's again an example where an industry like hospitality, where it's all about customer relationship management, about interaction, about soft skills, about problem solving, could very much be applied into a world where these people are not trained to deal with these things. Because, we were talking about it earlier in the car as well when I was showcasing one of the experiences that I had. And you rightfully said, well, if you think about the fact that in most countries, to become a doctor, on your CV, on your educational CV, there's hardly or no time dedicated to developing soft skills.
Think about it,
right? So again, it's cross industry that could be the solution.
Great example, and I experienced it myself. What you just said. A doctor studies 7 years university, and if he wants to specialize another 4 years, 11 years, and he doesn't get 1 hour on his curriculum, on his academic curriculum, he doesn't get 1 hour of communication with the patient.
Right.
And when I worked with Abbott, I had a chance to experience that because they asked me at a certain moment they had big problems with their therapy, their drug on the HIV. Okay, very patient HIV. Think about it. This guy, his life is really it's incredible the problems that those guys have. And so they asked me to help on communication for their therapy. So I didn't know a clue about this HIV, and so I said, "Yeah, I'll go in the field."
Communication towards whom?
To the communication to doctors. Okay. Mainly to doctors. And so I didn't know a clue about that. It was for me
right.
So I said, okay, before trying to do something to add value, I'm going to go in the field. So I went and I spent time with medical reps and doctors. And I was shocked. Because the only thing I heard was the doctor was talking about the HIV, and the rep was talking about therapy. And nobody was talking about the patient. I spent 2 days in the field. I never heard the word patient.
The word patient, that's amazing.
Attention to the patient, the problem and the solution. Yeah. And the patient was just, so exactly, coming from the field, your field, that industry has a tremendous need of, okay. Right. But, it's not the only one. I remember, for example, again, when I was at Procter, early 2000, this is when telecom, for example. At that time,
Right.
you had a fixed phone on your desk or at home, and that
And then
was
all of a
it.
sudden
Then the
we got
mobile
the whole
phone
mobile
arrived,
phone.
Vodafone,
Right.
and they arrived with all their. And what happened? The headhunters were calling P&G guys. I said, guys, we need you in the telecom industry on marketing. And an army of ex-P&G ended up in the telecom industry. And you saw what happened. They sell now the package like they sell Dash, Ariel, or Pampers, 2 + 1 free,
Exactly.
blah 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 blah. Because it's another application for another industry.
Yeah.
And then the last example. I know you are passionate about luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who for more than 10 years? Who the number 2 at the LVMH, just under the owner, Bernard Arnault, just under the general manager operational for
Yeah, I think it was an Italian guy,
Exactly.
Bellani, or I don't remember his name exactly. Did you know him?
Tony Belloni was my colleague at Procter & Gamble Italy, because I was commercial director Italy for all divisions, and Tony was the general manager of the soap and detergent division. We were colleagues. And then we ended up, Tony was promoted. He became the president of P&G Europe. And then he ended up becoming, for 10 years, what was LVMH looking for? Branding, the brand management toolbox of Procter & Gamble.
Right.
And Tony, he brought many talent from Procter in the whole structure, and they reinvented the branding, the brand managers of Dior and all their brands. Ask you another question. Do you know Estée Lauder?
Mm-hmm.
Who is the guy who...
They had another person that came from consumer goods.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Procter & Gamble.
yeah.
Fabrizio Freda,
Right.
he doubled the value of Wall Street of Estée Lauder.
Right.
Not just because he did financial stuff, but because he did marketing stuff. And Fabrizio was my colleague at Procter & Gamble in Belgium.
I think the key also to this is that when you're within an industry, you tend to get, I always use the word polluted. I don't know if you agree with that. But because you're so deep into it, you don't necessarily look at the other perspectives that can be the solution to a lot of your problems. And I think the example that you gave from high, C-suite level leadership from consumer goods into high-end luxury is a very good example. And that brings me to the example that I'd like to share and that I'd like to talk a little bit about as to when I joined from hospitality, a yachting company. So I joined a company selling luxury yachts. I was not exactly Riva foremost, with whom, by the way, I had done a lot of cross-industry marketing activities, which fast forwarding ended up resulting in me joining that company that owned the Riva brand as well. And I always like to talk about that very beginning, the early stages of joining the company, because I actually invited you on a team building exercise.
I remember.
And you remember what my objective was. I had a sales team of people that were used to selling, I would say, amongst the most expensive objects you can buy, luxury yachts, from 3 million to 15 and even more million euros. So we're talking about, ultra high network individuals that are the customers. And I felt at a very early stage already that there was a need to waken these people up as to the fact that there's other industries that they could learn from, right? So I ended up inviting you to speak during
But I remember
a session that we
briefing.
had.
I remember your briefing.
Yeah, I remember. Well, why don't you share it? What was the
your briefing was, you told me, Bruno, I want them to understand the importance of being closer to the market. It's not because you sell Riva brand and whatever that you can snub all the actors and the users and the clients and blah, 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 blah.
That's the number one. There was a number two objective, you remember?
No, tell me.
Well, the one that I wanted to see who was receptive to change or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which was a smart way of doing it. Because
but why don't you share a little bit what you spoke about? Yeah.
I remember because those guys, they were completely shocked. When I arrived, first I saw a lot of skepticism. Of course, this guy coming from Procter & Gamble is going to tell us how we should sell Riva boats and blah, blah, blah. What the hell is this? My new boss is crazy, or what did he smoke? What did he smoke? And I could see that on their face. And so I decided on purpose to be extremely provocative. And I took the most provocative example I could come. And it was amazing to see their face. I come back on the example. this most amazing example was how Procter & Gamble launched Always. Always is a sanitary pad, okay? Feminine hygiene. Okay, what the hell is that? We talk Riva, and this guy coming from another planet is going to tell us about sanitary pad, feminine hygiene. And I said yes, because Procter & Gamble has no presence in Europe. They decided to launch this product in Europe. And what they did, the first thing they did, to understand how to make a product which would really answer consumer needs. What they did, I remember I told that to your guys, they hired an agency, and that agency, I'm sorry, I told them I'm sorry to explain, I enter into details, but it's needed to understand. That agency, they went in the public toilets in cities, collecting used sanitary pads, bringing them to the lab, and at the lab they were engineers and product developers looking at where the flow of blood was. I'll stop here.
Right.
Because I was watching their face. They were saying, where are we going here? And then they ended up, those guys, they saw, the quantity of flow, where the flow was directed and everything. And you say, wow, I couldn't believe it. This is just the beginning. I was watching their face, and I said, "I'll go."
Well, put yourself in their shoes, right?
Of course,
you were talking about.
And then when I told them, but it's a great example of what it means being closer to the market. When I told them, you know what they also did? They took 100 women during their week of menstruation, okay, and they invited them to sit on a glass transparent with a video camera under. And they were just sitting there for hours and hours, and the camera was watching. Okay, you understand what I mean, okay? And then they ended up what? They ended up to know where to distribute the absorbent part of the pad in the pad, middle, side, and then they invented the aids. You are man, but the woman in the room, they understand what I mean. The pad which was rectangular, it became with two aids on the side because they had seen it was needed. When I told that to your guys, I could see some they were really saying, like that, but positively. And some others were like that. So your second objective.
Objective met.
Yeah.
Objective met. Because I remember very clearly that at the end of the session, there were people that came over from the team and they said, wow, we never thought of it. I mean, it's an eye-opener to look at things from another perspective, from another industry.
Exactly.
And some others were not so much in agreement, and it was approved that they were more change averse than the first group, so to say. So, and that's very normal in an organization, but it definitely helps in identifying these things, and hence why at the time, we had a lot of fun doing it because we had great conversations with the team afterwards. And but again, it's this correlation between what can mass consumption teach luxury, and the opposite way around as well.
Of course,
obviously,
yes,
I mean, there's always. I remember, I think I mentioned it in one of my previous podcasts as well. At a certain point, I had employed a girl from Colgate, similar company to Procter & Gamble. And the first reaction I got, but not only from my own team, but also from peers and from senior executives was, but how can you employ somebody that has no clue about luxury? And the answer was very simple. Well, she doesn't know about luxury, but we can piggyback a lot on her marketing expertise because she comes from a real marketing school. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it proved to be very successful because indeed she had a lot to learn, and that was her motivation about luxury. And the opposite way around, she gave a lot in terms of her expertise.
No doubt.
But it's interesting. Would you say that until today, because we were talking really extensively about cross-industry and how it can be leveraged. Do you have the feeling today as a consultant that there is an openness, generally speaking, or you still have to always sort of incentivize people, senior executives, to say, hey, don't be scared to hire without, not from within, but also from outside your industry. What's your feel? Have you seen a change throughout your career, or is there a bigger openness to it now than there was before?
I would say yes. Depends on the industry. There is a famous matrix from McKinsey that which to illustrate what you are saying, and we don't have something to draw it here, but it's simple to explain. You take an horizontal axe, and on the horizontal axe you put on the left side internal internally focused. On the right side, you put externally focused. And then on the vertical one, you put flexible and control at the bottom. And then when I train people, when they call me as a consultant to help, I draw this simple matrix on the flip chart. And then I say, where is your industry? In which quadrant is your industry? Okay. And then I say, where is your company? Okay.
Right.
And then I take an example, Procter & Gamble on the horizontal axis from internally, externally focused. I explained the story of She 2 minutes ago. Okay. Procter & Gamble is managed by the consumer.
Right.
You take some industries, they are managed by manufacturing, by R&D, and those guys, they invent a product, and then they say, sales guy, marketing guy, go and sell it because everybody needs it. It's great innovation, And
Actually,
then you have the same thing on the vertical axis. If you are a pharmaceutical company, of course, you need control. You cannot go, you need control, you need okay. And then it depends on the industry, because some industries are already more in the middle, but some industries are still far on the extreme, okay, or on control or on manufacturing. So there is more resistance. So I would say it depends on the industry, but there is a lot of progress. I see a lot of progress.
Whilst you were giving those examples, another example came to mind. You remember the Volkswagen Phaeton?
Yeah.
I think that spoke a lot about an industry that held on to industry to develop something that ultimately wasn't taking into consideration the market and the customer.
And the money they throw on this project.
Exactly. I mean, it was a car that was a fantastic car. It was absolutely...
Best value on the market.
Exactly. I even drove it because they were trying, when at the time I was based in Milan, and they were making cars available to, to transfer our VIPs and so forth and so on. And I said, wow, this car is amazing. The problem was that it was conceived by engineers from within the company.
Ferdinand Porsche was an engineer, and he's the guy with this vision.
And you want to build the perfect car, fine, but is anybody going to pay the same premium for a Volkswagen as for a Mercedes or a BMW, whatever?
Problem was marketing.
And the problem was marketing, and it was just not positioned the way it should have, and probably should never have been built in that respect, because it didn't make money whatsoever.
Sure. So, but Mario, it made me think about, everybody heard about Jack Welch. Jack Welch was CEO of GE, mythic CEO of GE. He was nominated CEO of the century. It was last century, but okay, he was CEO of the century. Do you know how GE was selecting? How Welch was selecting the leaders to put as business leaders?
I remember the famous 4 E's.
Exactly. That's what I want. This is where I'm trying to go. Welch was saying, when he was asked, and it was just in the culture of GE, as a manager, you had to apply that, okay, for your business and developing your organization. He had the 4 E's. The number 1 E was energy, which means that I'm going to appoint you a leader because you have demonstrated that you have physical and intellectual energy. You are quick. You have a lot of energy. Second E was energize, because you have some people who are bright and excited, but they paralyze their organization, they terrorize their organization. Now, how do you transmit that? Motivate people, okay? 2. 3 was edge. And edge means you have the balls, you have the balls to implement the tough decision when it's needed. You don't procrastinate, you do what's right at the right time. And then execution, of course. Okay. And so, nowhere it was mentioned that you needed the technical expertise in the sector where I was appointing you. And so, he was moving a guy from aircraft engine to X-ray machine in medical, because he was looking at the leadership. Right. And he said, if you are smart and you're a good leader, you surrounded yourself with all the technical capabilities. So it's It's also a good example of how you don't need to have the technical expertise, okay, to be a good leader and a CEO of a business. And he was right. Okay.
Yeah, and the same applies in many industries. I mean, if I look back at the industry that I've been working in for many, many years, which is hospitality, what makes a good general manager is those that are good leaders, because you can't be an expert in food and beverage, rooms, sales and marketing at the same level. So you're going to have to take on people that are way better than you. I actually remember when I did my executive MBA back in 2007, I had a American professor that was my mentor, and he always said to me, you have to remember one thing: the best leaders surround themselves with people that in many fields are much more competent than themselves.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And those that are not good leaders, that are that don't particularly appreciate change, will take on people that know they can control and that are not necessarily brighter than they are, right? It's that simple. And on that topic, actually, I think there's many examples that could be given, right, on cross-industry thinking. To sort of wrap up on the subject of cross-industry, would there be one more example that you would like to bring on the table that was for you flagrant, either because it should have happened or it did happen in your career, that you say, this is an example of how a cross-industry practice was just doing the magic and making the difference? Is there another one that you think of that you say, this one I want to share?
But an concrete example, I would need to think a bit, but instead of an example, I would like to add one element.
Okay.
And listening to what you were saying, I think, Mario, the additional element that the type of industries you are in, luxury and hospitality, versus fast-moving goods and leadership, we have talked. Mm-hmm. But I think there is one additional skill in your industry which is needed, is you need to love people. Because you sell emotions, you sell experiences.
Right.
Okay. When I was at P&G, I was selling product and performance. Okay, mm-hmm. The housewife wants the laundry to be cleaned. Okay, right. Fine. Pampers, it's a bit different already, because you sell a rational benefit. The baby should remain dry. Okay, and then he should look happy because the mom. Okay, so there was a rational and a bit of emotional
and a bit of
benefit
emotion.
At the end.
It's combination.
You see the mother, the baby smiling, and the mother is happy. But in your business, you sell experiences and emotions. If you sell perfume, you sell luxury goods, you are less in rational, you are more in emotion. And so you need to add this touch on leadership, you need to add this touch of people should also have this emotional intelligence, more emotional intelligence.
Right.
And it's important. It's an important point, very important point in your industry, the importance of emotional intelligence skill. I don't know if you agree with me.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm thinking back of the move at a certain point that I made from hospitality into the nautical industry. We had, you were present at one of them. I invited you at the time as well. Mm-hmm. I thought, when I analyzed, for instance, the behavior of customers that come and check out, these unbelievable boats that are displayed there and have the ability to buy them. Of course, they look at the product, but it's also what you build around it and how they associate themselves, the famous sense of belonging to the brand, right? Why a Riva as opposed to a Sunseeker? And here is where you go into the emotional aspect, yes, like you said yourself. And it touches upon so many layers. I mean, I pride myself, obviously, just like you. We didn't mention that you're half Italian, half Belgium, so am I, only that you have a mom that is Italian, if I'm not wrong.
Exactly.
Your father is Belgian.
For me, it's the opposite. Belgian, and you is the opposite.
Yeah. But, I mean, we pride ourselves on our origins. And when I was at Ferretti, we were selling the made in Italy. Beyond the brands, we were selling the made in Italy. So when we had our boat shows at a certain point, I said, well, we have to reflect that made in Italy in other aspects as well, because that is what connects people emotionally with the brands. It's made in Italy. So, for instance, just a small example, at the Cannes Boat Show, we made an agreement with one of the former hotels that I was in charge with. The general manager said, would you like to be in the face of affluent customers, right? Of course, he said, well, why don't you come and do the catering for us at the evening that is the main evening of the Cannes Festival? But you really have to showcase your know-how in terms of hospitality, Italian gastronomy and everything. Well, guess what? Everybody was circulating around our stand, not just because of the food. It was the whole atmosphere, the selling of the made in Italy. That went way beyond exactly.
I identify myself to this brand,
exactly,
this Italian
exactly,
touch.
Exactly.
And the more and more, if you look at statistics today in marketing, you know this. You as I know, more and more, and the Gen Z generation, they don't buy products anymore. They buy experiences,
Right.
and it's emotion. And so more and more, emotional branding is the new way of the new way of doing marketing. It's all about brand authenticity, brand identity, and you need to go and sell the soul of the brand. This
Right.
is what marketing is all about. In your industry, luxury and hospitality, this is even more important than any other industry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And again, we get back to conclude on the subject on merging industries, right? I mean, if you go and buy a Louis Vuitton bag today, it's an experience beyond the bag, not for nothing, right?
It's not because you want to put your stuff into it and you don't look if it's accommodating.
you
look
go.
at the brand, the image,
Right,
and
absolutely.
your image carrying the brand. Okay.
Which now carries me forward to the next subject that I would like to address with you, which we love because there's 100 million anecdotes we could share of our travels, of what happened in our professional life, which is the power of cultural diversity and the power to adapt to culture diversity as well. So I wouldn't know where to start.
Start with the you. I remember you were. You were telling me some time ago this anecdote. You were on a plane, and it was a story of a luggage with German and Italian.
That goes some time
story.
back.
It's a great example of.
Well, it's not a story about what happened professionally, but I think it could sort of pave the path to us talking a little bit about cultural diversity. And again, for those listeners that are either German or Italian, there's no bias here. There's no prejudice. But what happened was, I'm actually glad you brought it up. So I was flying to Berlin, from Rome to Berlin, and coincidentally met our company's lawyer at the airport, who ended up being on the same plane. So we boarded the plane, and then ultimately I said, "Can I help you putting up your trolley?" She was a lady, so as
It's your charm.
We ought to be gentlemen, right? So, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'd appreciate that." And we were just sitting across from one another. We both had aisle seats. So instinctively, what do? I check if there's nothing, in the compartment above her seat, and I feel there's something, and it's a coat. At the very moment that I have my hand in that compartment, the gentleman who's behind me stands up, and he's a big German guy, and he says in German, "This is meine Mantel, this is my coat." And I said, "Well, okay, that's fine. So do you mind, if I take it away, because we need to put a trolley on it?" And, he looks at me as if, I'm doing something wrong. Whilst this is happening, and I swear to God, the Italian I start hearing in Italian, questo tedesco, no, this German. They think they can own the whole compartment just by putting a coat in it. And then I hear Germans saying, typisch Italienisch, referring to my reaction to. So I hadn't even said anything, and it already triggered a discussion on the plane between Italians and Germans. And I found it so interesting because if you think about it, I mean, how do you handle a situation like that, right? And in professional life, the adaptability to cultural diversity can mean failure or success, right? Of course. I'm glad you asked me to share that story. What ultimately happened is I kindly asked the gentleman to remove his coat, because otherwise I was going to end up putting her trolley on his coat, which he didn't want anyway.
And what happened with the lady? What happened with her? She give you a big kiss?
No. She was appreciative. She was actually a little bit embarrassed that the whole discussion started as a result of it. But you know, everything was hunky-dory afterwards. It was solved.
But you know this story, since you mentioned German and Italian. When I was with GE, I was responsible for Europe, as I mentioned. So I was 6 flights a week. Was my normal week, okay? And so I would stop. Remember at the beginning when I took over the job and all that, the objective was to gain some new, significant, visible customers. And so I was living in London, so I would leave early, first flight in the morning at 7 from Heathrow. And that day, I had it was already the beginning of my assignment. I had a meeting at the metro in Germany. Okay, meeting was at 10. So 2 days before, the agenda was decided with German. The agenda was decided.
I mean, it was bulleted.
Meeting from 10 to 10:45. This was not 10:45. All the meeting was at 10. The meeting would start. Okay, so I would arrive a bit earlier. At 10 meeting with everybody's there. the agenda, we go through the agenda. At 10:45, meeting is over, decisions are made. If a German says "niet," it's "niet." Okay, you understand that it's "niet." Okay, and then we decide when is the next meeting and action plan. Who does what? So you leave there. I would go back to the airport because I know the meeting at 4:00 in Florence in Italy with Coppa Italia. Okay, so remember, arrive there at 3:45. There is no one. At 4, there is no one. I'm still in the waiting room. Okay. Then 4:15, 4:20, a guy arrives and say,
one person shows up.
Buongiorno, bonjour. Good afternoon. My colleagues arrive. One is in the traffic, the other one is still in a meeting, but they are going to join. Let's have a coffee. So they have a coffee. Where are you from originally? They get to know you. Then another one arrives. I'm sorry, I'm a bit late, but let's have another coffee. So you have a second. You have your second coffee, and then eventually the meeting is going to start at 4:45 or something like that. And then half an hour later, everybody has to move and leave and all that. So you end up feeling, if you don't know about the Italian culture, you end up. I would go back to the day after to London to my office, and my boss would say, "How did it go with you and this new prospect, Coppa Italia? Did you manage to get something?" I say, "Yeah.
You had a coffee.
I managed to drink coffee because
right.
And then I understood because living then I understood. I understood that Italians like that. Your mom teaches you when you are young. Your mother said, "Non ti fidare di nessuno." Okay, don't
trust anybody.
Don't trust anyone. Okay. And you grow up with this, okay?
Sure.
And so before you decide to do business with someone, you want to know who this person is. And it's like two dogs, they meet. Okay, it's the same thing, but it can take for a while. And you are working and you are progressing, okay? And if you don't understand that, if you are not adaptable, as you say, adaptability, you think that you are wasting your time, and you are not wasting your time at all. Yeah. That's the way to do business.
Yeah, very true. And again, there's so many anecdotes when it comes to cultural diversity and airline industry. We were just talking about flights.
Yeah.
I used to fly Lufthansa all the time because they were efficient. Because where I lived at the time, that was especially the times I was in Milan and Venice, they had great connections to an airport that works extremely well, which is Munich Airport. And one day I ended up taking a flight, Lufthansa flight, to Germany and then connecting to the States, to Phoenix, Arizona, for the purpose of, having the best connection, so the smoothest connection, right? That time, the flight arrived late. So I was late for boarding and I potentially was going to miss my other Lufthansa flight into Phoenix. But I was traveling a lot. I had the senator card at the time, was a frequent flyer, and there was somebody gently waiting at the plane with my name saying, "Mr. Chessa, we are going to help you." And I said, "Fine, that's great. I really appreciate you, making sure I can make my flight." "Yes, but you are going to Washington, D.C." I said, no, I think there's a misunderstanding. I'm going to Phoenix. What had happened is they had already rebooked me on another flight because they took for granted I was never going to make the connection to Phoenix. And I said, but the reason I chose Lufthansa was to make sure that I am going to make my connection. So we ended up having a little verbal fight, and I ended up saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to give it a try anyway. The flight is still boarding to Phoenix, so I'm going to go by myself, pass by a line, a passport, because I obviously still had to go through customs and stuff like that. And I ended up making the flight. Now, I was thinking afterwards, sitting on the plane to Phoenix, which I ultimately made, and this is no criticism to Lufthansa, it's more how the mindset works in terms of cultural diversity. Yes. If I would have been sitting on an Alitalia plane, which, let's be honest, had the reputation to almost never be in time, right? But a situation like that would have been solved probably with a bigger likelihood, because there's that, sort of mental approach of, okay, there's chaos, there's a problem, we need to fix it.
And they are so
we're going to get,
moment where Italians are fantastic.
And that brings me to your experience as well in Italy, because even within Italy, right, there's tremendous
it's not one
cultural
country.
difference.
People think that Italy is one country.
Oh no, it's
you and I, we know it's not one country.
Right. Huh? But give me some examples of your own doing and your own professional career within Italy when it came to share some anecdotes. I think you mentioned some about the Neapolitan. You did some course, and you had you had people from Napoli. That I don't remember within what context
It
this
was
was.
when I was as abbot, as I mentioned earlier, training those medical reps. I was bringing the Procter and Gamble methodology of persuasive selling or communicate to convince. This is what I had called the training. So I would give them the methodology, and instead of immediately say, "No, let's reapply to your reality." It's always good when you train. It's always good to make them reapply in a field where it's completely out of their reality, because then they let go. They are not. And so just to have fun, I invented some games, some scenarios, a bit. And I remember one scenario was a man as a participant. He would receive a briefing from me on a sheet of paper, and it was, you and your wife, you managed to save 10,000 euros. And you have your car, you can't see your car anymore, it's so old. And you just stopped by 2 days ago at the Alfa Romeo dealer, and you saw this beautiful new Alfa Romeo. So tonight you are going to attack, you are going to convince your wife tonight that we are going to buy this new Alfa Romeo. Okay, and then some feminine participant of the training, she would give her briefing. It was the same context, except that her wish was to buy a new kitchen, because last weekend they had friends at home and the oven didn't work, and she said, "Tonight I'm going to convince my husband that with the 10,000 that we save, we are going to buy a new kitchen." But no one knew what was the briefing of the other. I did that in Brescia, which is north of Italy. Mm-hmm. It was boring. Like no one was able. It was no theater. No, it was just and okay. Then you do that in Napoli, in Naples. I did that in Naples. I could have taken the visual of the scenario and put it on the television like it was. It was pure entertainment. Right. This man would come and he was, telling his wife how beautiful, how great, how much he loves her and everything. And then he was trying to sell his Alfa Romeo, and then how the wife. So this is in Naples. It's all about theater, emotion, theater. They're so good at it. And in the north of Italy, it's more like Germany or Austria, where they are. But another story, you talk about the U.S., your flight, Phoenix, and all that. Another story. When I was at Procter, they sent me to the U.S. At that time, going to the U.S. was Lamech. You needed to. So I was young. I was very young. I arrived there, and I was a regional sales director for the Midwest for one division of Procter. Mm-hmm. And my boss told me, the biggest customers are north of Michigan, so we need to fly to Grand Rapids, was the north of Michigan. Took a small flight, arrived there, and the purpose was to meet the biggest customer and to meet my staff, my local staff. So, okay, we arrived there, lunch. We stopped in a fast food somewhere in Grand Rapids. And my team is there. The waiters arrive and say, "What do you want to drink?" Iced tea. I say a beer. At that moment, I see the face of everyone like that. I realize
total silence.
Yeah, I'd done something wrong, and my boss was preoccupied. And so I said, "Did I do something wrong?" And they say, "Yeah, Bruno, you're during working hours, no drink, no alcohol." I said, "Okay, sorry, so I didn't know." I call the waiter. I say, "Iced tea for me, please." And I said, I work at Procter in Belgium, at the headquarters of P&G Europe is are in Brussels, and the president of Europe is there at lunch with us, and he drinks his beer like everyone in Belgium. But this is Belgium, and it's the US. So okay, understood. I adapted. Then we had dinner at with this major customer. After aperitif at 6, after 4 or 5 dry martinis that they were drinking. Already okay. We went for dinner. This guy, big ego, vice president, said, "I'm going to teach you about Californian wines." So 2 or 3 bottles of Californian wines. Then there were French wines on the menu. I said, "I'm going to offer you." Okay. So we had 2 bottles also of French wines. We went out of this restaurant My boss, he didn't know his name anymore, and he couldn't find his car anymore. Was completely drunk, completely drunk. Okay. So at lunch, one beer, I couldn't drink it, and at evening, he could. So those are the cultural differences, and the point is, you need to adapt. Okay, as you were saying, and. If I would have to put a conclusion to these cultural differences, I think I would say Darwin said that before us.
I was going to ask you a quote.
Yeah,
is that a quote?
Yeah, I could. What he said, if I remember well, he said, this is not the most intelligent who is going to survive. It's the most adaptable person, and this is exactly what we are talking about. Okay?
Right.
So
right.
Adaptability.
And that brings me to the point you mentioned. I mentioned at the early stage that you wrote a book, "Successful Young Leaders Are Courageous," and in the book, and thank you anyway for inviting me to share some anecdotes of my own career in here. So you're giving tips. You're giving tips to youngsters as well. I know you feel very strong about that. What would you say today? Because I've always been wondering until what extent, and we can touch upon this just very briefly, till what extent would young people be receptive to reverse mentoring, in the sense that we all know mentoring usually is looked upon as the experienced guy teaching the younger guy something. I personally believe there's opportunity the opposite way around. Let's not talk about the financial aspect of things. That's not. Do you think today, having written this book, that there is a receptiveness when it comes to the younger generation being open to simultaneously teach us, the older generation, something, and the opposite way around? Well, the opposite way around already helps. Works, sorry, but do you think there's, because youngsters are very different. You write it in your book as well. They're having different sets of criteria when it comes to jobs, to employment. I'm interested to have your take on this, actually, very, very briefly. I mean, it's a subject we could discuss.
My reaction is that can young leaders today add value to people like us? Okay, add value to people. The answer is yes.
Absolutely.
They know. They know. I see my son. He's 35. He's in digital marketing. When I sit next to him, I learn so much. Okay, so.
But are they willing to
the capability?
So?
But the willingness, this is different. Because referring to my son, I heard him talking to someone. He said, I was working for companies before creating my own company. Now he's creating his own agency, his own emotional branding, like we touched base on that a bit earlier. He was saying, when I was working for corporations, my approach was I give you my performance and you pay me for that. Then I give you my career, and I expect you to train me, okay, to develop me. And he said, the last two companies I worked with, they were paying me well and all that, but in terms of personal development, zero. So I left and I created my own company. So to me, this is an example where they are able, they have many things to bring and more and more. No, AI is coming. AI is coming. Yeah. A young guy is, he's going to learn fast, 10,000 faster than you or me. Okay, but the willingness. This is the problem. Story. The roadblock is more the willingness.
I think that should be a subject of conversation for a possible future.
Welcome.
So yeah. I'd like to wrap it up here. Our unfiltered beer is finished, so the timing is right to wrap up this Unfiltered Connections podcast. I want to thank you, but again, before wrapping it up entirely, just a few fire questions. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Just one very quick answer from you on the following. A key leadership trait today, a key characteristic, one single one foremost.
Adaptability, you said it.
Okay. Common mistake in organizations. Again, one single one.
Lack of client-centric.
Okay. A culture country that taught you most.
Italy.
Okay. And one word for leadership.
Motivation.
Great. Bruno, it was an absolute pleasure to have you. Really enjoyed the
Me
conversation.
Too. Thank you, Mario. Give me the chance.
And hope to have you back sometime on the podcast, Unfiltered Connections. Thanks again. And to all the listeners, thanks for having listened to yet another episode of Unfiltered Connections. And stay tuned. We'll be in for more. Thank you.